I was standing in the pouring rain, holding a legally binding document that gave me the absolute right to evict an entire family from the home their great grandfather built. I had the power to make them homeless with a single phone call. You are probably wondering how a completely ordinary guy ends up holding the deed to his worst enemy's ancestral estate. Well, to understand the end of this twisted game of cat and mouse, you need to know exactly how the trap was set. My name is Marcus. I am 45 years old, and for the last 10 years, my life has been a fortress of peace. But peace is an expensive illusion. 20 years ago, my identity was stolen. Some faceless coward ripped my financial life apart, and I spent the next decade fighting through a mountain of legal garbage just to prove I was who I said I was. I worked 80-hour weeks. I skipped vacations. I sacrificed everything to rebuild my credit, my reputation, and my sanity. Eventually, I won. I bought a gorgeous, secure home in a quiet, gated neighborhood. I parked a silver Lexus in the driveway. I had heavy iron gates out front. I built a wall between my family and the cruel world outside. I thought the nightmare was buried forever. I was wrong. The past does not die. It just waits for you to lower your guard. It started 4 months ago. My phone rang at 2 in the morning, an unknown number. I normally ignore those, but something in my gut told me to answer. It was an automated voice, metallic and cold, demanding I call an 888 number regarding a legal summons and an impending lawsuit. My stomach dropped. I assumed it was a ghost from my stolen past, a zombie debt from 2 decades ago. Usually, I just call these collection agencies, ask for their physical mailing address, and send them a legal dispute letter proving the identity theft. They close the account, we move on. But when I dialed that number the next morning, the woman who answered did not want to follow the rules. Her name, I would later find out, was Evelyn. I gave her my file number. Before I could even explain my situation, she started rattling off a fabricated debt from 1995. Her tone was aggressive, condescending. I calmly interrupted her. I told her I had absolutely no knowledge of this debt, and I informed her about the identity theft. That was when she dropped the corporate act. She screamed through the speaker. She told me she knew exactly who I was and that I was going to pay one way or another. I asked for her mailing address so I could send my legal proof. She flat out refused. I kept my voice steady. I told her I knew my consumer rights. Evelyn laughed. It was a nasty, cruel, scraping sound. She told me that only cowards and losers hide behind consumer rights. And then she did something that froze the blood in my veins. She started describing my house. She described the exact shade of paint on my front door. She mentioned the silver Lexus sitting in the driveway. She told me that the heavy iron gate out front would not stop the repossession agents from dragging my life out onto the street. She said she was going to put a lien on my huge, pretty house and leave me with absolutely nothing. Then, click, she hung up. I stood in my kitchen, completely paralyzed. Logically, I knew what she had done. She had pulled my public property records and looked at my address on Google Street View. It was a cheap digital intimidation tactic, but the logic did not matter. The psychological violation was absolute. An invisible predator had just walked into my safe haven and held a knife to my throat. If you have ever had someone try to take what you worked your entire life to build, or if you simply love watching a bully get completely destroyed, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. Because the revenge I plan for Evelyn is something they do not teach you in law school. Tiep tuk noi dung. The harassment escalated immediately. The automated calls started coming every single hour, day and night. My phone, which used to be a tool for business and family, became a weapon pointed straight at my head. I could not sleep. Every time a random car drove past my gate, my heart pounded. I was checking the security cameras constantly. Evelyn had successfully turned my sanctuary into a prison. I tried to fight back the right way. I filed a formal complaint with the Attorney General in Ohio, where her phone number traced back to. 2 weeks later, I got a letter back. They could not find any registered business under the name she gave me. I reached out to the Federal Consumer Finance Bureau. They completely ignored me. The system was blind. The law could not protect me. Evelyn was a ghost operating in the shadows, immune to the rules of society. But she underestimated one critical detail. When you push a man who has already lost everything once, he does not run away. He hunts. I realized that if the authorities could not find her, I would have to do it myself. I started calling her automated line over and over. I did not speak. I just listened to the recording, pressing 0, pound, and star in different combinations, trying to break into her internal phone directory. After 3 days of trying, the system glitched. It redirected me, and an automated voice proudly announced a completely different company name. I had my first thread. I went to my computer, typed the new name in, and hit search. Hundreds of fraud complaints flooded my screen. Victims from all over the country, elderly people terrified of losing their pensions, single mothers crying over frozen bank accounts, all extorted by the same ruthless woman. The digital trail led out of Ohio and pointed straight to a small town in New York. I was no longer the mouse. I was the cat. I hired a private investigator in New York, a guy who did not ask questions. I gave him the new company name, a blank check, and one simple instruction: find the face behind the voice. 2 weeks passed in agonizing silence. The hourly automated calls from Evelyn kept coming, taunting me. I endured them, knowing that every time she called, she thought she was winning. Then, on a Tuesday evening, my private investigator called me back. He found her. He found her real name. He found her hidden address. He found out she was running this entire illegal scam operation out of a basement. I booked a flight to New York the very next morning. I rented a car and drove to the address my investigator gave me. It was a massive old family estate on a quiet street. I parked 2 blocks away, staring at the house where the woman who terrorized my family slept. I had the upper hand. I was finally in control. But as I sat there in the driver's seat, watching the front door, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it slowly. "Hello," I said. It was Evelyn. Her voice was dripping with absolute malice. "You think you are clever, Marcus?" she whispered through the speaker. "I see you. You are in the black sedan, 2 blocks down. You really should not have come here." Before I could even react, the headlights of an SUV flipped on right behind me, trapping my car in the narrow street. The headlights of the SUV blinded me. The heavy grille of the truck was inches from my rental car's front bumper. I was boxed in on a dark, narrow street, 200 miles away from my family. Through the phone, Evelyn was laughing. It was a sick, triumphant sound. "I told you, Marcus, you do not know who you are messing with. Welcome to New York." She hung up. 2 heavy-set men stepped out of the SUV. They were not wearing suits or uniforms. They looked like cheap muscle, probably local guys she hired to intimidate the people she scammed. They started walking slowly toward my car. The bigger one reached into his jacket pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every survival instinct in my brain screamed at me to panic. But panic is for prey, and I refused to be prey ever again. I took a deep breath. I reached up and tapped the dash camera mounted on my windshield, making sure the red recording light was flashing. Then, I picked up my phone, dialed 911, and held my thumb hovering right over the call button. I rolled my window down exactly 1 inch. The bigger guy slapped his heavy hand against my glass. "Turn the engine off and step out of the vehicle," he grunted. I looked him dead in the eye. I kept my voice deadpan, completely devoid of emotion. "The camera on my dashboard is currently live streaming high-definition video and audio to a secure off-site cloud server," I said slowly. "My lawyer has my exact GPS coordinates. And if you do not move your vehicle in exactly 3 seconds, I am pressing send on this phone and reporting an armed carjacking to the state police." The man froze. He looked at the blinking red light on the camera. He looked at my phone. The false bravado melted off his face instantly. These guys were not hardened cartel hitmen. They were cheap bullies, and bullies are terrified of paper trails. He took a step back, muttering something under his breath, and waved at the driver. The SUV slowly backed up, giving me just enough room. I threw the car in reverse, hopped the sidewalk curb, and sped out of the neighborhood. Pattern interrupt. I did not drive back to my hotel. I drove straight to the local police precinct. I walked in, slammed my laptop on the desk, and filed a massive, detailed harassment and stalking report, attaching the video footage of the men and Evelyn's phone call. I knew the police probably would not arrest her tonight, but I did not need an arrest. I needed a documented, all legal paper trail. I was building a cage, and she was walking right into it. Physical intimidation was Evelyn's last desperate card. It meant she was terrified. The next morning, the shadows were gone. I did not hide in a rented sedan anymore. I hired a professional state-licensed process server. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall and built like a tank. At high noon, in broad daylight, in front of all her nosy neighbors, we walked right up to her front porch. Evelyn opened the door. She looked completely different than the terrifying voice on the phone. She was wearing dirty sweatpants, her hair was a mess, and her face went completely pale when she saw me standing there. "Victoria," I said, using her real legal name for the first time. "You have been served." The process server slapped the heavy stack of legal documents against her chest. She stumbled back, the papers scattering across her great-grandfather's hardwood floor. I turned around and walked away without looking back. 2 weeks later, we were in small claims court. I sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing a tailored suit surrounded by thick binders of evidence. Evelyn sat across from me. She looked small, pathetic. The tough predator persona was completely gone. Sitting right next to her in the gallery was her mother, glaring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. When the judge called our case, I did not show mercy. I laid out every single piece of evidence: the fake debt, the unregistered business, the illegal threats, the late-night phone calls, the intimidation tactics. The judge looked at Evelyn with absolute disgust. He did not even need to deliberate. He slammed his gavel down and immediately ruled in my favor, awarding me the absolute state maximum of $3,000. It was a victory. I had fought the monster and won. But as the courtroom cleared out, I walked past Evelyn and her mother. The mother leaned forward. Her eyes were venomous. She hissed at me in a loud whisper. "You better hope he does not try to take your house," the mother sneered at her daughter. "Your great-grandfather built this home with his own bare hands. It is our legacy." I stopped dead in my tracks. The mother thought she was insulting me. She thought she was showing strength. But all she did was hand me the exact weapon I needed to destroy them completely. They loved that house. It was their pride, their generational wealth, their identity. Evelyn had threatened to put a lien on my house. She had threatened to leave my family homeless on the street. Suddenly, $3,000 felt like a joke. It was not enough, not even close. I walked out of the courthouse, got into my car, and pulled out my laptop. I logged into the county property tax database. I searched the address of the house her great-grandfather built. What I found made me smile for the first time in months. Evelyn had ruined her family. Her string of illegal, failed businesses had completely drained her parents' bank accounts. To keep her out of jail, they had taken out a massive, predatory second mortgage on their precious family estate. The house was drowning in debt. It was leveraged to the absolute breaking point. If they missed even a few payments, the bank would seize it. I did not try to collect my $3,000. I let it sit. I went back home. I hugged my wife. I played with my daughter. I slept soundly. Because revenge is a dish best served absolutely freezing cold. Open loop. Pottuhe moilam. 5 months passed in silence. Then my private investigator called me. "Marcus," he said, sounding almost shocked. "The bank just foreclosed on Evelyn's house. The family is being evicted. It is going up for public auction next week." This was it, the kill shot. I immediately hired a local real estate proxy to bid on my behalf. The property market in that tiny New York town was dead. Nobody was buying. I submitted a brutal, insulting, lowball cash offer to the bank. I waited for 3 agonizing days. On the 4th morning, my phone rang. It was my real estate proxy. "Hi, Marcus," he said, his voice completely tight. "We have a massive complication. The bank did not accept your offer." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean? Did someone outbid us?" "No," the proxy replied. "Evelyn found out you were the one trying to buy it. She just walked into the bank with a cashier's check to pay off the default. She is trying to buy her own house back. She's trying to buy her own house back." I sat in my home office, gripping the phone. My real estate proxy was panicking on the other end of the line. He thought we had lost. He thought Evelyn had magically pulled a rabbit out of a hat and saved her great-grandfather's legacy. My mind, however, went completely quiet. The game was not over. It was just changing shape. "Stand down," I told my proxy. "Let her pay the bank. Let her think she won." I hung up the phone. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Evelyn thought she was playing checkers, but we were playing chess, and she had just sacrificed her queen to save a pawn. Here's what Evelyn did not realize. When I looked into her county property tax records weeks ago, I found out her family had not 1, but 2 mortgages on that estate. The first mortgage was with a traditional, state-regulated bank. That was the one she was desperately paying off with her cashier's check to stop the immediate public auction. But the second mortgage was the real poison. It was a massive, high-interest loan taken out from a private equity firm in Manhattan. Her parents had signed it to fund Evelyn's failed legal defenses from her previous scams. Evelyn was draining every single illicit dollar she had left just to satisfy the first bank. She was leaving her flank completely exposed. I picked up my phone and called my legal team. I told them to contact the Manhattan private equity firm that held Evelyn's second mortgage. That firm specialized in predatory lending. They did not care about houses, they cared about liquid cash. And they were currently trying to offload toxic, high-risk assets. Evelyn's family was the definition of a toxic asset. I made the firm a brutal, all cash offer to buy Evelyn's secondary debt portfolio directly from them. I offered to take the headache off their hands right then and there. They were thrilled. They accepted my offer within 2 hours. We signed the heavy stack of legal paperwork digitally. I wired the funds from my business account. In exactly 48 hours, I went from being Marcus, the victim she harassed over the phone, to Marcus, the primary line holder of her family's debt. I did not just buy her house, I became her bank. I literally owned the financial chain around her neck, but I did not tell her. Not yet. Cold revenge requires perfect timing. I waited exactly 1 month. I let Evelyn feel completely safe. I let her celebrate her fake victory. I let her sleep soundly in the bedroom her great-grandfather built, thinking she had outsmarted me. Then, on the first day of the new month, her next mortgage payment was due. But this time, it was not due to a faceless corporation in Manhattan. It was due to me. I instructed my lawyers to send the new payment routing details via certified, registered mail. I made sure it required a direct signature from Evelyn herself. Inside the thick legal envelope, I included a short, handwritten note. It read, "Dear Victoria, I am your new mortgage servicer. If your monthly payment is even 1 minute late, I will initiate a hostile foreclosure myself. Best regards, Marcus." 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Evelyn. But the voice on the speaker was not the arrogant, terrifying predator who had threatened my family months ago. Her voice was shaking. She was crying. "Marcus," she sobbed into the phone, "please, we have nothing left. I spent everything saving the first mortgage. My mother is sick. You cannot do this." I sat in my quiet, safe house. I looked out the window at my driveway, at the heavy iron gates that protected my family. I remembered the sheer terror she had injected into my life. I remembered her telling me that only losers and cowards avoid responsibility. "I am going to put a lien on that huge, pretty house of yours," I whispered into the phone, repeating the exact words she had used on me. Then I hung up. She missed the payment. She was completely broke. I did not hesitate. I unleashed my legal team and initiated a direct hostile foreclosure. Because I held the private debt, there was no public auction this time. There was no bidding war. The state handed the deed directly to me. 2 weeks later, the county sheriff arrived at the estate on a cold Tuesday morning and formally evicted Evelyn and her mother. They were escorted off the property with nothing but garbage bags full of their clothes. The house was finally mine. I flew to New York the following weekend to claim my prize. I rented a car and drove into her quiet neighborhood. I pulled up to the curb. The property looked abandoned. The grass was overgrown. The front windows were dark. I walked up the long stone driveway. The crisp autumn wind rattled the dead branches of the oak trees in the front yard. I stood on the porch, holding the shiny new brass key the state had mailed me. I slid the key into the heavy wooden front door. I turned it, but it did not click. The door was already unlocked. I froze. The sheriff had secured the property days ago. Nobody was supposed to be here. I pushed the door open slowly. It creaked loudly in the dead silence. The hallway was completely dark, smelling like dust and old wood. I stepped inside, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked up, and standing at the very top of the wooden staircase, staring down at me in the pitch-black shadows, was someone I absolutely never expected to see. I stood frozen in the doorway of the dark hallway. The air inside the house was thick, smelling of old dust and desperate sweat. Standing at the very top of the grand wooden staircase, swallowed by the shadows, was Evelyn. She was not supposed to be here. The county sheriff had officially evicted her and her mother days ago. The locks were supposed to be changed, but she had found a way back in. She looked nothing like the arrogant predator who had called my phone at 2 a.m. months ago. Her clothes were disheveled. Her face was pale and hollow. In her right hand, she was tightly gripping a heavy iron crowbar. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my mind went absolutely ice cold. I did not step back. I did not yell. I slowly reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, and blindly pressed the record button. "You think you won?" Evelyn whispered. Her voice echoed through the empty house. It was a broken, manic sound. "You think you can just walk into my family's legacy and take it?" She raised the heavy iron crowbar and smashed it violently into the vintage mahogany banister. The wood splintered with a deafening crack. "If I cannot have this house," she screamed, tears streaming down her face, "nobody will. I will rip the copper out of the walls. I will smash every window. I will burn my great-grandfather's legacy to the ground before I let you sleep in my bedroom." She swung the crowbar again, shattering a beautiful stained glass light fixture on the landing. Shards of glass rained down the carpeted stairs. She was waiting for me to panic. She was waiting for me to rush up the stairs and fight her. She wanted to drag me down into the mud with her. Instead, I took one calm step forward. I kept my voice completely flat, devoid of any emotion. "Victoria," I said. She stopped mid-swing, breathing heavily. "Do you know the difference between you and me?" I asked, looking up at her. "When you wanted to destroy my life, you hid behind fake numbers and automated machines. You used cheap intimidation. But I operate in the light. I use the law." I held up my phone. The red recording dot was glowing brightly in the dark hallway. "You are currently standing inside a property legally owned by a private entity," I continued, my voice echoing off the broken wood. "You broke through a secured rear entrance. That is felony breaking and entering. You are holding a weapon. That is armed trespassing. And you just caused over $1,000 in malicious property damage. That is felony vandalism." Her eyes went wide. The crowbar in her hand suddenly looked very heavy. "I did not just walk through the front door," I told her. "When I pulled into the driveway and saw the scratch marks on the back patio lock, I did not play the hero. I sat in my car, and I called the local police. Right on cue, the sound of heavy tires crunched on the gravel outside. Flashing red and blue lights pierced through the front windows, painting the dark hallway in frantic colors. Evelyn dropped the crowbar. It clattered loudly down the wooden stairs, landing right at my feet. The front door burst wide open behind me. 3 local police officers rushed in with their flashlights drawn, blinding her. They ordered her to the ground. I stepped aside and watched. I watched the woman who threatened to make my family homeless get pressed against the hardwood floor her great-grandfather built. I heard the cold metallic click of handcuffs snapping around her wrists. They dragged her down the stairs. As they pulled her past me, she did not scream. She did not curse. She just stared at the floor, completely broken. I walked out onto the front porch and watched them put her into the back of the cruiser. Her mother was standing on the sidewalk across the street. She must have driven Evelyn here. The mother was sobbing, watching her daughter get taken away for felony burglary of their own ancestral home. The police took my statement. I emailed them the video of her confession and the property damage. It was an open and shut case. With her previous fraud charges finally catching up to her, and now multiple felony counts added to the list, Evelyn was not going to see the outside of a prison cell for a very long time. I waited until the police cars drove away. The street went quiet again. I walked back inside my house. I picked up the crowbar, set it aside, and swept up the broken glass. I spent the next 3 months renovating the estate. I fixed the banister. I upgraded the plumbing. I painted the walls. I erased every single trace of Evelyn and her toxic family from the property. When the renovations were finished, it looked beautiful. A perfect, quiet summer home for my family. But there was one last piece of business I had to take care of. I sat down at the heavy oak desk in my new study. I pulled out a piece of premium, thick stationery. I picked up a fountain pen. I wrote a letter to Evelyn's parents. I sent it directly to the cramped one-bedroom apartment they were now renting on the bad side of town. I kept it incredibly brief. It read, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I wanted to inform you that the renovations on my new summer home are finally complete. The hardwood floors your grandfather installed are truly magnificent. I am enjoying them immensely. I also wanted to leave you with one final thought. If your daughter had not spent her entire life terrorizing innocent people, and if you had not enabled her behavior, you might still have a place to call home. Sincerely, the man you tried to extort." I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and dropped it in the mailbox. I never heard from them again. I locked the heavy front door. I drove to the airport. I flew back across the country to my real home. I pulled into my driveway, past my heavy iron gates, and parked my silver Lexus. I walked inside, hugged my wife, and picked up my daughter. That night, I slept perfectly, because out there in the world, there are predators who think they can take whatever they want. They think kindness is weakness. They think playing by the rules makes you a coward. But they forget one very important rule of nature. Sometimes, the mouse you corner in the dark turns out to be a lion.